What if everything you thought you knew about willpower was just wrong? Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a topic that literally affects every single one of us every single day. We're talking about the psychology of discipline. Using our curated source material, we're going to break down the deep neurological mechanics of the brain and trace it all the way to actionable automated habit formation. Our goal is to completely transform how you view willpower, procrastination, and self-control. Okay, let's dive right into this.
So, be honest with yourself for a second. Have you ever looked at someone who wakes up at 5 a.m., hits the gym, and just effortlessly crushes their daily goals and thought, man, I just wasn't born with that discipline gene? It's an incredibly common myth, right? This idea that self-discipline is just some fixed genetic trait you're either blessed with or you're not. But looking at the contemporary behavioral science from our sources, that's just a completely different story. Self-discipline is actually a highly trainable cognitive skill. It's not this rigid biological destiny. It's way more like a dynamic muscle that you can actively strengthen.
And to really understand why that's a myth, we need to make a fundamental distinction right out of the gate. In personality psychology, there is a massive difference between conscientiousness and self-control. They sound similar, but conscientiousness is one of the big 5 personality traits. It's your stable, lifelong propensity to be organized, follow the rules, and work industriously. It's kind of who you are over the long haul. Self-control, on the other hand, well, that's an active, in-the-moment cognitive mechanism. It's the specific tool you use right now to resolve a conflict between, say, an immediate temptation and a long-term goal. So you might not have naturally high conscientiousness, but you can absolutely train that reactive mechanism of self-control.
To understand how to train it, we really have to look at the internal battleground inside your head. According to dual process theory, our brains operate using 2 competing systems. First up, we have System 1, which psychologists like to call the hot system. This is rooted deep in your limbic system. It's fast, reflexive, it's totally driven by emotion, and it wants that sugary donut right this second. Countering that, we have System 2, the cool system. This one lives in your prefrontal cortex. It's slow, analytical, and highly cognitive. This is the system desperately trying to remind you about your fitness goals while fighting off the reflexive urges of that hot system.
Now, what's really interesting here is that we don't just have to speak in metaphors anymore. We can map these exact cognitive processes directly to the physical hardware in your brain, specifically within that prefrontal cortex. Think of the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex as your mental workspace. It gracefully handles task switching and working memory. Next, you've got the anterior cingulate cortex. That's essentially your conflict detector, constantly tracking errors and regulating your underlying emotions. And finally, the orbital frontal cortex is your braking system. It handles real-time impulse control so you can resist those sudden temptations. It's literally the physical machinery of discipline.
But here's a crucial piece of context, and it has to do with the number 25. If you've ever wondered why teenagers and young adults can sometimes struggle so heavily with impulse control, well, it's because the prefrontal cortex, that vital cool system we just mapped out, is actually the absolute last part of the human brain to finish myelination. Now, myelination is just the process where a protective sheath forms around the brain's wiring so signals can travel faster. And that physical maturation process, it literally doesn't finish until our mid-20s. So discipline quite literally takes time to physically develop.
Which brings us to a profoundly hopeful realization. And I think it's captured perfectly by this quote from psychologist Walter Mischel. He reminds us that no matter how bad you think you are at resisting temptations, this skill can absolutely be enhanced. We aren't just victims of our biology or our environment, you know? If the prefrontal cortex is the hardware, we have the ability to continuously upgrade the software through practice. And honestly, Mischel is the perfect person to tell us this because he designed the single most famous test of willpower in human history.
So back in the 1960s, Mischel and his colleagues at Stanford University created the legendary Stanford Marshmallow experiment to test delayed gratification. The premise was deceptively simple, but incredibly high stakes if you're a 4-year-old. Basically, a researcher placed a single marshmallow in front of a preschooler and offered a deal. You can ring a bell and eat this one marshmallow right now, or if you can wait 15 minutes while I leave the room, you get 2 marshmallows. It was the ultimate showdown, right? The hot limbic system going head-to-head with the developing cool prefrontal cortex.
And the results were pretty fascinating. While most kids really tried to wait, they used all sorts of creative strategies like covering their eyes or singing to themselves to distract from the marshmallow. Ultimately, 70% yielded to temptation before the time was up. Only a minority, just about 30% of these 4-year-olds, successfully shift control from their hot emotional system to their cool cognitive system for the full 15 minutes to earn that second marshmallow.
But the true impact of this experiment wasn't actually realized until decades later when researchers followed up with those exact same individuals. The kids who were able to delay gratification didn't just get an extra treat that day, they went on to experience profoundly different life outcomes. We're talking significantly higher SAT scores, much better stress management skills, and even a lower body mass index on average. This simple ability to delay immediate comfort for a distant goal turned out to be a foundational driver of human achievement and behavioral alignment later in life.
So the crucial point here is, how do we actually get better at this as adults? Well, for a long time, psychologists bought into this idea of ego depletion, the concept that willpower is a limited resource that drains away the more you use it, kind of like a battery. But it turns out the battery metaphor is flawed. Recent research presented in our sources completely flips this on its head. Ego depletion is actually heavily tied to your beliefs. Studies show that if you simply believe willpower is an unlimited, abundant resource, you actually perform better on self-control tasks and resist that mental fatigue. Literally, your mindset directly influences your cognitive endurance. How crazy is that?
This mindset shift is absolutely vital when we're dealing with the ultimate enemy of discipline, procrastination. Think about the last time you chose scrolling on your phone over doing a piece of important work. We usually beat ourselves up about it, right? We call it laziness or poor time management. But look at this reframing. Contemporary psychology tells us procrastination is actually an emotional regulation problem. You aren't avoiding the task because you're lazy, you're actively avoiding the negative emotions, like boredom, anxiety, or the fear of failure that are associated with that task. You're basically letting the hot system win just to avoid temporary discomfort.
Okay, let's see how this all builds into an actionable, daily strategy, because relying on sheer willpower all day long is just exhausting for your prefrontal cortex. The real secret to extreme discipline is actually bypassing willpower altogether by automating your behavior. And we do this through the neurological habit loop, which is a 3-part pattern outlined by researcher Peter Hollins. First up is the cue, the trigger in your environment. Second is the routine, which is the actual behavior itself. And third is the reward, which reinforces the whole loop. When a behavior becomes a deeply ingrained loop, it literally requires zero active self-control to execute.
To automate this discipline, Hollins provides a brilliant framework for hacking the system. First, you want to focus on keystone habits. These are foundational behaviors, like regular exercise, that naturally cause a ripple effect of good choices in other areas of your life. Next, try habit stacking. This is where you attach a new habit directly to an existing one, like doing a set of push-ups immediately after brushing your teeth. After that, adopt an identity-based mindset. Instead of saying, "I'm trying to run," tell yourself, "I am a runner." It's a subtle shift, but a really powerful one. And finally, deliberate environmental design. Put your running shoes right by the door. Hide the junk food on the top shelf. You want to lower the cognitive load so that the right choice is actually the easiest choice.
And as you begin hacking your own system, keep this number in mind, 66. While the exact range varies from person to person, research shows it takes an average of 66 days for a new behavior to become fully automatic. That means for about 2 months, you are going to have to consciously rely on that prefrontal cortex. You'll have to exert some effort. But if you stick with it, the behavior eventually shifts into automaticity. This is exactly why consistency always beats intensity. You are literally rewiring your brain's pathways.
Which leaves us with this final, vital question to close out our explainer today. True discipline isn't about just white-knuckling your way through life, it's about strategic self-management. It's about understanding that your prefrontal cortex needs some help from you. So look at your surroundings right now, look at your daily routines, and ask yourself, how will you design your environment today to protect your goals tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me, and I really hope this deeper understanding of your own mind empowers you to start engineering the habits that will shape your future.